He was sworn in when the time of his appointment, so welcome. And don't have a bad impression of this because we're having such. Bear with us. Thank you. We're glad you're here. It's really wonderful to have a full board. And next, we have student representatives to board. Come up and tell us anything in this evening.
Good to see you all again. I have a brief presentation this time. I know it's side of the week, but our students just finished finals week and they're getting ready for new classes. So we decided, we're not really pushing out anything big and let students focus. But we do have a few things. With that being said, so first and foremost, Mamma Mia had its opening week this week. The first show was Friday. Everyone was really excited about it. And to kind of promote it, we decided to do a spirit week for Mamma Mia. So next week, we'll be doing Monday is Money Monday, where you wear green. Tuesday is Halloween Tuesday, which is the clothes. Wednesday is White Wedding Wednesday, everyone wears white. Thursday will be Disco Thursday. The alliteration theme doesn't hold true on that one, but it should still be fun. And then Friday will be Father Friday, where you dress up like your dad. And I know those seem like kind of overlapping ideas that don't really hold true to one another, but they're all in the movie Mamma Mia, which is obviously what the musical is based off of. So regardless of the jokes are gotten, I think students will have fun with these spirit weeks. But yeah, it should be really exciting. In other news, we are pushing out our promotion for executive council. So the executive council is the president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. So students are starting to turn in their applications to begin their elections. Pretty soon you all will know who will be here next year, talking to you for the board meetings. So I'm sure you're excited about that. We're super excited. I remember going through last year. So yeah, it should be great. Furthermore, intramural basketball, March Madness is starting soon. We just finished our football tournaments. Now we decided to do basketball. During the time to go March Madness, and students love our intramural sports. It's kind of big thing on campus. And basketball is definitely an intense one. So I got to get some shots up and get ready for my game. Yeah, and then other than that, last but not least, we have another student month barbecue on Friday, where we're going to be highlighting our work with students and teachers in the month of February and what they've achieved in their classrooms. So yeah, that's all I have for you all today. But the third trimester will be super action packed. We have huge events like prom, senior showcase, flow challenge, just name a few artists in the rally. So expect that in the future. Thank you all.
Well, we're glad you'll be with us for a few more months still. You know where you will be next year yet?
I do not. I'm still looking forward to making that really big decision. But yeah, I'm still waiting for everything to come back. I'm just excited to, wherever I go, I feel like I'll be confident and comfortable and ready to go.
We're looking forward to that update.
Thank you.
So I think I might have a little longer update than Atticus. But so on February 23rd, we had over 60 band students that went on a multi-day field trip to South Lake Tahoe, and they had a guest composer come in, which was a great useful experience for the students. I think it was part of that group and she loved it. We had a dance fusion showcase, which was really, really good last weekend. I went on Friday, and not only did dance fusion perform, but there was also from Walnut Grove Elementary that had performer dance, as well as our student-led band Primavera and a couple of different solo singers, which were incredible. And shout out to Ms. Smith, who is our main student director. Also last weekend, we hosted a boys volleyball tournament, which went really well, and our boys team had 4 wins and 1 loss, and got around 2nd place in the silver bracket. Last Friday, ASB and Apple students got the opportunity to attend the California Women in Business Conference. And we did a couple icebreakers in the beginning to get to know some of the other schools, and Katie was there, as well as Paso and something like that, maybe one other school. And then we sat through a presentation by Tyler Skinner, who was a part of Women Making Waves, as well as a presentation by the Vice President of Marketing at Pinterest. And we also got to talk to a panel of students and a counselor from California about it. And we got to ask different questions. This week is our Monday, this is Friday, so we have Neon Week, which is leading up to that. And the theme for our dance is Welcome to the Amazon. And it doesn't mean you have to like just like an animal or floor or anything like that. It's kind of more just decorations. So imagine like neon vines producing like black lights to light up the UV paint on like the vines and on the different like animals and stuff and a bunch of different like black birds and a waterfall in the river. And yesterday for our student week was where animal movement. Today we had lemon aid in the quality nutrition. Tomorrow is post a picture with your pet. Thursday is our rally, so our spirit day is wearing neon rally flag, and we'll have like a booth of nutrition with glow in the dark tattoos, neon accessories and tasting. And lastly on Friday is a PJ day to rest up before the games. And this is probably our most popular dance, and I personally am super excited. I always look forward to it. Also, on my rally day on Thursday, Agnes and Slow High's treasurer on the side will be coming tomorrow to have a shadow at night. And we'll take them to a couple of our classes, and they're going to see an 8 class as well as our video class, which is where we do our broadcast. And we'll also take them through the nutrition activity, the rally and some of the dance setup. Moving on from the unrelated stuff, our searching competes this weekend in Ventura, and we are undefeated thus far. We hope that continues. It'd be great to earn back-to-back league titles. Also this weekend on Saturday, we're having our annual craft week at the Memorial Day Community Center. And then next week, our mock trial team, which has been doing extremely well this year, is off to the state championship in Los Angeles. And then lastly, we're all excited about this new theater. Our drama program will be performing at Adams Family in April on the 14th through the 16th, and then again on the 21st through the 25th. That is all I have to say anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Both for doing wonderfully exciting things. So as always, I'm sure you would love to stay here and enjoy this wonderful theater and our school board can talk group up here for your entertainment, but we understand if you're going to. Thanks so much for coming and telling us that. A great part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayfield, did you speak program highlight?
Yeah, we have some principal back will join us via Zoom. To share some highlights from Bishop Peak. Mandy, can you pull up the slides for her? Yes. Mr. Jones, you there?
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me? Mr. Mayfield, was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. And then I cannot see the slides. So Mandy, I'll just ask you to move to the next slide when it's time. Does that sound like a good plan? Perfect. Even better plan. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here tonight virtually, but it's always nice to get an opportunity to highlight the work that we're doing at school. And I'm so proud of so much that is going on at Bishop's Peak. We're doing a great job addressing all of the academic and social emotional needs of our students. And while I could spend the entire time talking about academics, I worked with our student senators and some of our staff leaders, and we decided that we wanted to highlight the work that we're doing in response to our Youth Truth Survey and let our student senators lead this presentation tonight. So Mandy, if you go to the next slide and start the video, I will introduce you to Lizette and Isabel, who are our 2 6th grade student senators, sharing how it makes them feel to be part of the inaugural 6th grade class of student senators in San Luis Coastal.
My name is Isabel. My name is Lisette, and we're the Bobcat Student Senators. I am really grateful I got this chance to be a student senator because it makes me feel like a leader and a part of my community.
To me, it made me feel more confident about myself, and I like that in every meeting that we go to, we get to collaborate with middle schools, high schools, and even other elementary schools in our district. And something that we're trying to do right now is we're looking at the Youth Truth Survey data, and we're bringing adults and students to try to feel like they belong here at our school?
Stuff we're trying to do is like make spirit days. We are trying to include more people when we're playing a game, like sitting next to like people in other classes like art or social studies. That's what we're doing so far.
So Mandy, if you go to the next slide, when we got our Youth Truth Survey results earlier this year, we were really stunned and worried about the number of students that responded that they didn't feel like they belonged at school, or that they weren't part of the community or had somebody to talk to. So Lizette and Isabel and I brainstormed what we could do about that and wanted to start something immediately. And they are part of our Bobcat leadership team, which is what we call our student council at Bishop's Peak. And so immediately they said, let's get together and start doing something with our Bobcat leadership team to help people feel like they belong at Bishop's Peak. And our Bobcat leadership team in itself is almost half of our fifth and sixth grade students at Bishop's Peak. So that's a wonderful indicator of the students that want to be involved and be part of making our school a better place. So this is highlighting a couple of the things that our Bobcat leadership team does. Our Bobcat leadership team is headed up by 2 teachers and our new full-time school counselor. So if you go to the next slide, Ms. Kayla Townsend is going to share a little bit about what she's been doing and that tier 1 level to reach all of our students at Bishop's Peak.
Hi, I'm Kayla Townsend and I'm the school counselor. This year with adding full-time counseling, we've been able to really focus on some of the universal programs that we offer to teach into some of these skills that students need to feel belonging on campus. We started the year with our Start with Hello week, where we talked about how to introduce yourself to others and how to make sure that everyone always has a place to play. We then led into our Great Kindness Challenge week, where we talked about how to show kindness to yourself as well as others and why it's important to do so. And then our last week that we're really focusing on this year is Unique Week, which helps to kind of lead the conversation about how do you talk about your similarities and challenges and differences in a way that promotes inclusivity to everybody. Adding in these SEL programs helps not only our individual students feel like they belong, but also make sure that school is a more belonging and accepting place for everyone to be.
Thank you.
Hi.
And not only do we have the activities that our Bobcat leadership team has brought forward this year, but we have a lot of really long-standing traditions at Bishop's Peak, as well as new traditions that we've started in the last few years. Our carnival is certainly something that has been a hallmark of Bishop's Peak for years. I think that we figured out this year, it's been over 30 years that it's been in the making. Our variety show, art, music, Lego clubs, really having a variety of options that students can participate in before school, after school, and at lunch, so that everybody feels like they have some choice and voice, and that their interests and their personalities do belong at our school. We've also really systematized our buddies and our mentorship programs on site this year. And so having our upper grade students and lower grade students buddy up and do activities and reading and writing together has always been something that's been really fun. What we did this year is make sure that every single class on campus has buddies and has that team class that they sit with at assemblies and do peer editing of their writing together, do class parties together around the times of years that they do that. Also, our 2 SDC classes are integrated during that time. So when our classes do buddy activities, those SDC students are folded right in there and have their own buddies. We also added a 6th grade mentorship program this year. We have a couple new TKers that are newcomers and don't speak any English. So we had a couple of our 6th graders buddy up with them, be able to talk to them in their primary language and share with them about our school culture and be able to make them feel comfortable at school, as well as some of our 6th graders supporting 4th and 3rd grade classes who just need a little extra calm, companionship, and connection to start their day. So here you see our student senator, Lizette, again with her 1st grade buddy, Rosie.
I'm Lizette. And I'm Rosie. And we're going to talk about why we love buddies. So what's one thing that you like about buddies?
It makes me feel happy and I get to see Lizette again.
I like buddies because I get to see Rosie every Friday and I get to interact with a little buddy and we get to teach each other stuff almost every time that we see each other.
I love that Lizette said that they get to teach each other something. It's definitely a reciprocal relationship. After school sports has also been a phenomenal experience for our students. We have had 3 teams of every sport this year. And you see here a Bishop's Peak athlete has said, I've never done sports before. Now I know what it feels like to be on a team. It's awesome. And he was all decked out in his gear, ready for our first game that we hosted last Friday as I interviewed him. This has been a really great experience. And we've been fortunate to have both parents and staff as coaches at our school this year, which has really brought the whole school together. And I just had to share this because it was something that came up so organically and really embodies what Bishop's Peak is about. We had a family this year who has been fostering a student for years, and their adoption became final this year. And they shared with their teacher that they were going to miss a little bit of school in the middle of the day to go to the courthouse and make it final, but they'd really like to come back because he feels like he wants to come back to school and be there for the rest of his day. And very spontaneously, the entire school ended up coming out, lining up on either side of Christian as he was pushed with his parents in this just beautiful, spontaneous parade that celebrated him. So here's a quote from his mom. And then our last slide, I really wanted to celebrate that we are bringing together things that were traditions pre-COVID and bringing some of the new things that came about during COVID. Prior to COVID, Bishop's Peak had a monthly flag raising ceremony where the entire school community came together, raised the flag, celebrated each other, and was just all together. And during COVID, we went to weekly Zooms where we all met on Zoom at the same time. And I had guest speakers, our different students that would come lead the Zoom with me. And it became kind of this fun thing that students made up different cheers and they would lead the school in their cheer, and we'd open the door to my office and see if we could hear the cheer echoing throughout the school. And so now that we're able to be all back together outside, we meet for our flag raising and still do our cheers. So I'd like to end the presentation tonight with our Bobcat cheer.
Bobcat, say it loud! Bobcat, Bobcat, say it loud! Go Bobcats! Go Bobcats!
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share some of the great things going on at Bishop's Peak and highlight our students and some of the work that our staff is doing. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Thanks for sharing your students with us and your achievements and lessons and your activities and all of them. It's driving a big show. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Next, item is 7.1 correspondence. At the time the agenda was published, we had received one item of official correspondence from every institution in the West regarding the museum school mascot. And next is public comment, and at this time, we open up the agenda, the meeting, public comment on the general topic, or if there are those who wish to speak under items that are included later in the agenda, and we want to wait, you may address it now. I do have some yellow forms, and I'll read those out. We also have some written correspondence, and I'll read as we do our public correspondence. Public comment is done by approaching the podium when your name is called for the 3 minutes, which to address the board. A countdown clock will appear on the screen so you have an idea of how many minutes you have. These are items of general interest to the board that are within the jurisdiction of the school board. We have to to be respectful and any items that may be, no items that have to do with this boy, they can keep them up directly to the record. Now, at this time, I'm going to call names and a couple at a time, so we can be ready. If anyone else is here, we will turn on the board. Yellow sheet to overwhelm the people in the wall. Please fill one out. And these are calling names of the order in which to put forth the direction. So first is Tom Nato, followed by Jane.
Good evening, Board Administration. My name is Tom Mano. I'm the president of Mano Construction Company in San Luis Obispo. I'm a 1986 grad of SLO High. Mano has been in business in San Luis Obispo for this is our 142nd year. Probably we can say that we've built or worked on every school in San Luis Obispo over that time frame. I personally have worked on district schools since 1984. Myself. Our most recent project we're very proud of is the new track and field facility at San Luis Obispo High School. I have numerous longtime employees, many of whom have worked on that project and others in the Bishop's Peak project. Excuse me, 2 years ago. We look forward to your upcoming bond and congratulate you on that. And we look forward to hopefully bidding on the upcoming bond. Tonight, the purpose of my stepping up here and speaking before you is to discuss your potential consideration of a project labor agreement. Mano Construction, unfortunately, will not bid work under a project labor agreement and will not work under a project labor agreement. Project labor agreements limit competition, especially in our local market. And I would like to think about the fact that without a project labor agreement, the district will be able to accept bids from all bidders. Finally, just want to say, please give consideration to not signing into a project labor agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Jane, followed by Tom Giordano.
Evening. Similar to Tom, here tonight is to speak to you all. I appreciate the opportunity regarding the potential of a PLA as it pertains to the recent bond. My name is Shane Payton. I work for Tasco Glass. My name is Tom, Mano Construction. We've had the opportunity to work on the district, especially associated with the most recent bond. A list of those is the school high school building 100, phase 1-3, building 300, pool house, gym modernization, the annex, auditorium, Morro Bay High School, Mr. Speak Elementary School, Cambridge Joe. The Tasco Glass, we say we're a people company that happens to glass. We're very proud of the balance that we strike in taking care of our people. Longest tenured employee at Tasco Glass for 40 years. It's the graduate of San Luis High School a long time ago. But we strike the balance between taking care of our people and also providing a competitive bid. And I'm really proud of the work that we do here in SLO County. But we also pursue work in our County, Fresno County, and we provide a quality product for the end customer at a competitive price. And I would just ask for the opportunity to continue to do so here on local projects. We will be coming up next year on our 60th year in business, and proud to be a part of the local community. And I'm going anywhere, and just really appreciate the opportunity to continue to work successfully with San Luis Obispo. Thank you.
Next is Tom Giordano, followed by Alex Garcia.
Thank you for taking time to listen to me today. I'm Tom Giordano. Our company is Pro.
We've been in business for 35 years here locally, based out of Los Osos. We have worked for San Luis Coastal for over 30 years and have performed work on most campuses around the area. Most recent one being this one that we're having in meeting. I wanted to just kind of make a point that a lot of our employees are local, live locally, graduates of San Luis High School, Morro High School. And I think the biggest thing I get is when I have a 20, 30, 40-year-old man, and we're working with this week, or we're working with one of the other schools, and they just break out and give you smile and say, man, I went, this was my 8th class, you know, and this is where Mrs. Smith taught. And I want to continue the opportunity to give like 5 employees with the opportunity to give back to the community. I think it's important that they do, because each one of them has a vested interest in the work that we're doing. Me personally, I have 2 daughters that, you know, one currently goes here, one just graduated. And we take great pride in being able to deliver a product to you that, you know, exceeds what I think is called for, because we know that at the end of the day, it's our children that are here to use the facility. And with the PLA, it limits our opportunity to do that. It's been 30+ years. We'd like to continue that tradition of putting forth great work with the school district and the opportunity to competitively fit. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Carlos Garcia.
Hello, and thank you for allowing myself and others tonight to address the board regarding placing a PLA on the board of the youth bond measure projects. My name is Alan Garcia. I'm a member of the 6th generation San Luis Obispo County family. I'm also the owner of GF Garcia's original engineering firm. We've been in business since 1960. We're celebrating our 63rd year in business. I started in this business at the end of a shovel, and I worked my way up to the 2nd generation owner, and the process of transferring ownership to my boys. We're in it for the long haul. We've been here, and we want to continue to be here. For the past 28 years, we've really focused on schoolwork. We've done school work from Santa Barbara to Gilroy. As far as San Luis Coastal is concerned, we worked on, I believe, 5 of the first bond measure projects. We've been lucky enough to be a successful road bidder on several of the latest almost completed bond projects. I think we've worked on just about every campus in San Luis Coastal. We're a local firm. PLA will exclude us from participating in future San Luis Coastal work. My employees are local, their kids go to school here. We really would like to consider thinking about the local economy, the local people, and keeping our local money local. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I also have a request to speak from, did you want to go now? Yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
Good evening, President Shepherd and school board members. My name is Myla Vujovic-Labar, and I'm speaking right now early to action item 11.07. It has been a pleasure to teach in this district for 39 years, both the high school and the middle school level. I'm here to applaud the motion to hire an assistant principal at Laguna Middle School starting next school year. While our current principal, Nathan Miner, and vice principal, Christina Stanford, are doing an outstanding job supporting both the students and the staff at our site, an additional vice principal is definitely needed. The need for another vice principal was discussed by staff members last spring when personnel director Dan Block kindly came to Laguna Middle School to inquire about the needs for our site. This action item proposed by Dr. Prater has made our certificated and classified staff feel like they were heard. With current enrollment of nearly 800 students and increased enrollment predicted, an additional vice principal will bring us the calm and organization. Since the return to school from a year of online instruction, there have been a variety of student behavior incidents that present challenges in the classroom, in the restrooms, on the sports fields, and across the campus. School safety overall will be improved with this additional vice principal. There has also been an increased need to provide social and emotional help to support all students in the pandemic, especially for students that feel disenfranchised and disenchanted. Also, with approximately 40% new staff members the last 2 years, many teachers at Laguna Middle School will appreciate more administrative presence in the classrooms for guidance to help their teaching skills. Overall, this proactive staff will indeed ensure safety, engagement, and provides support for all staff. Due to multiple meetings that have taken place during our teacher collaboration time this year, and staff meetings talking about how to help struggling students, I hope that the new hire is bilingual and biliterate in Spanish. The new hire will then be able to positively collaborate with the parents of the English learners. It is also my hope that the new vice principal will meld well with the positive personalities of Principal Nathan Minor and Vice Principal Christina Stanford. It would be terrific to have an individual who will be upbeat and willing to help build a system of family at our site for students and staff. Again, Dr. Prater, on behalf of all of my fellow teachers at Laguna, I thank you so much for initiating this action. School board members, thanks for all that you do to keep the San Luis Coastal Unified School District so magnificent. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else? Present at this time who wishes to make public comment? Ms. Dawson, is there anyone on Zoom who can make public comment at this time? Okay, we do have a couple of written public comments, and I'm going to read at this time. One is, the first is from Jeremy Goldberg. Dear San Luis Coastal Unified School District Board, on behalf of the Central Coast Labor Council, representatives of over 70,000 workers within the Central Coast region, I want to ask that you and your colleagues consider implementing a community workforce agreement, CWA, on the construction that stems from the measure C-22 bond funds. Implementing a CWA would ensure that skilled local workers would be hired to improve the infrastructure of the schools in their own community. It would ensure our fellow community members would make a living wage along with benefits such as healthcare, and it will have a positive impact on the city, the residents, and the local economy. In 2018, San Luis Obispo implemented a CWA to slow city water resource and recovery facility. Has helped ensure the project success not only for the facility itself, but for our community as well. With nearly 80% of the workforce being skilled local workers, it set a superior standard in public works construction. The success of the WRRF project has proven that this can and should be done at the district level, which will have a longer lasting positive effect on local workers and our community. On behalf of local workers, please consider supporting the CWA. Thank you. And next, from Already Charlesworth. Laguna Middle School desperately needs an additional 5 principals for our growing student population and needs. As a teacher of Laguna, I see our current admin team working endlessly to try and support students and teachers to the best of their capabilities. The fact is that there are not enough people on our admin team to make this a feasible challenge. I'm a strong supporter of adding the second assistant principal to our team and hope that the school board understands and that is needed our school. Thank you for your time. This concludes public comment and general public comment at this time. Moving on to superintendent's update. First, we have business and budget update.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I wanted to, tonight we have a resolution for second interim. I want to thank Katie Eckman and her staff and services for all the work that they put in to these interim budgets. And again, that's coming up. Two other things. we've run into a lot of issues with dental insurance carriers. And I believe I brought this up to the board before with our current carrier, Delta Dental. And so we have a group throughout the county that is looking at a couple of other carriers, both Guardian and MetLife, to see what they can offer, both the price, number of dentists that are in their network. So we had a very good meeting on Monday, and are going to continue this process of looking at carriers and again with the purpose of not raising rates per se, but actually finding an insurance company that dentists actually pick. In particular in our local area. So I'll be reporting back to the board on how that group goes, as well as to all of our certificated classified staff and management staff. Because this is something that we have a health committee for the school district that meets and discuss the kind of plans and those types of things. So this will be one of the conversation pieces that we'll have moving forward. Next week, we also have the annual SISC renewal. So this is where they set rates for the next year. We had kind of a downtick in insurance during the COVID time period where people just weren't going to the doctor, we're doing surgeries, those types of things. However, we've made up for it in the past year and a half since we're back in. So we're looking at potential of most likely, I believe, the 7% increase in health benefits. A little bit of an increase with vision and close to the same in dental, but that represents significant dollars, right, moving forward. So again, I will be getting that information next Tuesday at the SISC renewal rate meeting. It's actually for the county. It's held in the CMR. And so I will be sharing that information again with the board as well as our staff once I find out the actual rates that come.
Thank you. Next, we have educational services.
Thank you. Just a couple of updates for you this evening. In November 2022, California voters passed Proposition 28, and that's a proposition that provides a minimum source of annual funding for arts in public schools. And we begun to really look at this proposition and how it can enhance our arts programs in San Luis Obispo. We have a few details on the program that I want to share with you. It has to supplement our current programs. So we've created a baseline of what we already have, and Proposition 28 funds have to add to our programs. The legislation gives us some specific areas where we can expand in the arts. Our schools have to do an annual report. Our district has to provide an annual report. So there's a lot of oversight as to how we are improving our arts program. They actually give us some information on allocation too. And we know that each site is going to receive an allocation. It will be based on the number of students at that site, and then an additional allocation for every student who is socioeconomically disadvantaged. So they really put a focus on that as well, which we really love. That means our Title I schools are going to get a little bit of a boost to help with their arts programs. We are getting some recent feedback that the funding may go down a little bit. The state is really looking at some of the requirements. But in San Luis Obispo, we're moving forward with the gathering feedback. And we actually held our first Proposition 28 advisory meeting. So we put together a committee. We got the word out through the parent communication, and we did have community members say that they wanted to give us feedback on this. We have parents from Children's Creative Project. We have Symphony in attendance. We also have music teachers from all levels and high school art teachers. So a really rich group of people who gave us feedback. So we will continue gathering feedback. We want to hear from our students, and I know that we'll listen to our student senators give us feedback, and we're going to continue this slow plan of implementation of Prop 28. But we really do look at it as an outstanding opportunity to really enhance our program across the district. So just a couple more things. Our Education Foundation is close to launching the Next Gen program, and you might remember it as Students of Promise. So we're really trying to target first generation or underserved students reach their college and career goals. So that might be help with their college application fees, it might be help with their AP fees, tutoring, things like that, that might give them a little boost. And again, this is our education foundation that has this emphasis and is kind of rolling out this project at our secondary schools. And then one follow-up, our D-Lab meeting that we had to cancel a couple of weeks ago has been rescheduled. It's tomorrow night at Pacheco Elementary, and it starts at 5:30, and I hope you're all at the gym.
Regarding the arts, the art proposition we made, I believe that one of the governor's proposals is to slash art funding from, I don't know, if it's not my name, from the state level. Do we receive, you know, if we receive any of that, I mean, do we expect some, if that, we can cut from that in order to kind of make up for Prop 28 stuff?
We actually received, or are promised money in two different areas that targeted the arts a little bit. I know that Mr. Pinkerton can talk to you a little bit about, what was it, arts and music and instructional materials block grants. And that's one that will be, I think, going.
It's actually gonna be part of second tonight, so, though the title Arts, Music, and Construction Materials Block Grant sounds very arts and music friendly. It was actually kind of a catch-all for a variety of things that the district could spend funds on. And we're actually asking the board to approve a plan for that tonight, at the board meeting, so those funds, were supposed to be about $4.6 million. The governor, 4.2, 2.3, I believe is at the top, so again, Katie will kind of update it, doesn't go through, but, those funds, as the economy has gone down, as the governor is looking for ways to have more money for the current year budget for 23-24 for next year, they are looking at not giving us our second half of that funding. So it says 4.6, we're only going to get 2.3. And so that is something that's completely different. Now, one of the things they did as he cut that was that, hey, now that Prop 28 passed, and we're going to get money through that, we don't necessarily need to have this one-time funds available. So a lot of lobbying efforts will go forward with the governor, I believe, to keep those one-time funds for districts, as well as the legislative, proposition that was passed by the voters, right, which is a percentage of the actual Prop 98, the funds that come to education in California. So as I had said, they're a little worried. Their initial estimates were based on a higher level of 98, but with the economy suffering, they're worried, that amount is going to get readjusted lower based on the amount of taxes that come in by the state. So it's one of those things. It's one of the reasons why, like lottery funds, we spend them a year after we receive them. That way, you know what you're actually getting, and you can allocate based on that number.
Right, measures C and D.
Yeah, so a lot happening in terms of measure C and measure D. As a matter of fact, we have our the CBOC meeting on Monday for measure D. We're actually going to meet right here in this building and do a little tour of Morro Bay High School with that group. The measure D CBOC will continue throughout measure D. So hopefully into the fall as we complete projects for measure D and finish that budget up, as well as the two conference budgets. We have selected some architects that we'll be bringing forward to the board for approval at the next study session, along with beginning to have a conversation about phase 1 priority projects. And so that we can kind of get that board input on those projects, the phasing, and we can get started. Right, the sooner we can get architects on board, the sooner we can get the board to prioritize projects to move forward with, the sooner we can start looking at construction delivery methods and getting contractors on board and doing all those things that we need to do. Because just the planning phase itself is at least a year for most projects. So it takes 6 months for the architect to draw, design, and then really DSA another 6 months while you're waiting for that approval. So the sooner we can kind of move forward, the better. That said, this is a huge effort to break down and to prioritize. So the fact that it was just November, and the bond measure passed, I think we'll be able to present some good, some good, status level where we're at and hopefully begin to move forward with some of these projects and get that planning and design underway. But I look forward to sharing it with the board, and that's gonna be, on the 16th.
We look forward to hearing it. Right, our next item is, 1901 resolution certifying the second interim financial reports.
Maybe you should be able to pull it up from your side.
Hang on. Yes, sir. No, wait.
Oh,
All right, good evening. So tonight we're gonna go through the second interim. No.
Yeah.
So anyway, so our first slide, we're gonna review the fund balances at the beginning of first interim, which was the same for budget adoption. We started with 24,000, or 24,024,085. As the second interim, we had our budget, our fund balance was adjusted. There we go. Was adjusted by a fair market value reversal. If you remember at the beginning of unaudited actuals, we talked about how we had to do a fair market value adjustment for cash and what we would recognize as the June 30th ending balance, what the county treasury said the interest rate was, and we posted a journal for that. Well, then we had the audit, we had, as we went over last month with Brian, an audit finding, and it resulted in about $12,000 of an overstatement. Well, I made that audit adjustment, so you can see our original beginning balance changed about $12,000 positive. As we go through it, we have our estimated revenues. They didn't change too much, roughly went up about $53,000. Our expenditures, some adjustments were made there. I'll go through some of the major adjustments later. And in the end, we have a change to the fund balance of a little over or a little less than $1 million. So we're still going to have a projected surplus, but it has decreased since we talked at first interim.
I don't understand. God, yeah.
Our federal revenues changed slightly, about $25,000 as well. That is Title I, Title II, Title III, and a tiny bit of carryover was adjusted based on the latest revenue, or not revenue, GAN limits from CDE.
Nice and clear.
Adjusted by 23,000. That's typically just different awards coming in, like I said, for special education. There'll be lottery adjustments, and I think those were the two major adjustments we did for state revenues. And local revenues were reduced. It wasn't that we thought we were going to get less revenue. Sometimes what happens is we get such as special education funding, we get some part of it broken down from local property taxes that we get passed through from the county office. The other piece of it is state revenue. And so it's just a shifting of where it's coming from based on what the cell phone notified us for. So there was probably an increase, part of that increase in state revenue was for special education funding, and that would be the decrease in our local revenue. Overall, we saw an increase of $52,000. One thing I wanted to circle back around to, we talked about it first interim was the transportation reimbursement component that was passed in with the governor's budget back last July. And last time at first interim, we didn't have enough information to understand how that was going to be broken down. But now we have a clearer picture. So our transportation expenditures for 21-22 were $3.4 million. The state would like us to reduce or take out capital assets. So we reduced for our capital assets. And then they're estimating a 60% reimbursement rate, which would be 60% after that would be 1.9. However, we have to take off what the state pays us based on the 12-13 allocation that is part of our LCFF, which is $552,000. So our estimated reimbursement in June will be 1.3.
Thank you. So Katie, that's the title of today, which is always good, because I can barely add 2 + 2. But when we were doing this slide and we were looking at the, I think the 10-year projection, and I just want to explain how to put one to the top. And so when Katie did the 10-year projection, it was a week ago, a month ago. And then, so this number 1.3 is new. And so the deficit, I've got this right, the deficit, the projection is affected by this.
Would be positive, but then there's some other things that we'll talk about when Ryan gets into the 10-year that will also affect that deficit. But yes, in theory, if you look at the 10-year and you look at the deficit that is right there at this moment, and you were to apply this 1.3 million, the deficit would go down. It is not part of the 10-year. It's not part of, yeah, it's just not part of the 10-year right now. The other piece of this is the state will give this every June because they have to get the unaudited actuals from the prior year, verify those dollars, and then reimburse us. So we're always running like a year behind, similar to lottery. And so that's another reason why when I was doing the interim, the information was new and we just weren't ready to. And we won't know exact numbers until June.
And so I just want to think nothing in the deficit may not be as big as it looks like on paper, but it
Might be bigger.
might be bigger.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Okay, so here's our revenue. Go over this pie chart. You've seen this before. Property taxes, of course, is our major funding source. We have other LCFF, which is our transportation, our education protection act, and a couple other small state funds that not state funds. They are state funds, but they're part of our LCFF, not our categorical state funds. So we get 7% roughly of federal funds, That is still slightly elevated due to some carryover for ESSER. Once those funds are spent down, we'll probably go down to about 5.5%, 6% there. Our state, though, is the one I really want to kind of point out. It's at 13% right now. Keep in mind that has 10 million, a little over 10 million of one-time dollars that we received. Part of it was the arts and music and instructional block grant. The other was the expanded learning opportunity that back in July, the governor gave us as one-time dollars. Those are included in the state revenue. Historically, the district runs about 5% state revenue. So right now it's looking a little higher with one-time dollars. We also have some multi-year grants that are also raising that state percentage. Our expenditures our highest part of our expenditures in our budget still continue to be salaries, running about 72 to 75%. We have operating costs at 15%, books and supplies at 8%, and utilities. We're broken out from our service and operating costs, and that's running about 3%. We're seeing an increase in our services and operating expense, so I thought it was might be helpful to break that down a little bit for the board. So here we have a slide that talks about our other service and operating costs. When you look at the 10-year, when Ryan reviews that with you, you'll see that in 22-23, our operating costs look to be about $3 million higher. And that is our estimate after taking out some multi-year grant funds that maybe are sitting in services and other operating costs before we do our 10-year. So we reduce knowing that those aren't going to be all recognized in 22-23. And so right now, this is kind of our estimate of where we think we may end the year. Utilities make up a large piece of that pie, but the other piece that stood out was the ELOP. Those are state dollars that we received to provide before and after school care. It's going to support our summer school program. So we have a lot of contracted services budgeted there right now. And we have 2 years worth of funding accumulated in that grant. So when the grant was first released, there was a lot of strings attached to it, and we held on to the money waiting to see if the state would loosen up their requirements, which they did. So now we're moving forward with using it to support some of our programs. Another cost that we don't normally have that's making up about 5% is our special education para. That currently we are using some contractor services where we are getting staffing from employment agencies, and that number is probably close to $1 million, which normally we would see in staffing costs, but just due to having a hard time for filling those positions, we are using agencies at the moment. And then of course we have LCAP, our educator effectiveness grant, make up a piece of it, and our NPS, which is our non-public school placement, make up about 12% of our services and other operating costs. So that's just kind of a major category overview, just to kind of give you an idea of why when you're looking at the 10-year, you'll see a big jump from last year to this year. Health and welfare benefit projections. As Ryan said, next year we're looking at a 7% for 23-24. Right now we just have it being a 3% increase off of our current year estimated liability of 8.8. You'll notice that is up 15.99%. Part of that is due to we had, I think, a 3 or 4% increase for health and welfare in October, and we also raised the cap for certain bargaining units by $1,000. So that increased our cost, but after that, that'll be worked in, and then we'll just continue to add the cost of the new health and welfare increase to that. PERS continues to climb. It's now projected to be at 27% next year. And back in 07, it was at 7%. So we've gone up 20% since 2007, or over 20%, by the time. Yeah, no, 20% for 23-24 if we get no relief from the governor's budget, which so far, we didn't mention that. PERS or STRS is at 19.1. We have not heard of STRS considering any rate increases at this time. Yeah.
So just, so I understand that it's gone up to 20%. Can you give a breakdown of what we thought? Just to give you more people.
The PERS increase,
Yeah.
the PERS board sets that based on their performance. So PERS is highly diversified, but they are subject to market gains and losses. And so they have the projected liability, just as we do for our post-retiree benefits. They're projecting out what their retirement payout will be. And that is how they set their rates. And they have a board that votes on it every year.
And so we as a district have very little control over this stuff.
Absolutely no control over it.
No. Thank you.
Our next slide talks about a comparative of LCFS entitlement to property taxes. And we are currently still receiving $10 million in local property taxes over what we would receive if we were an LCFS revenue district. This gap is shrinking as the state continues to fund large COLAs. Currently this year, it's a little over 12%. And next year, it's projected that it will be at 8%. And then drop down to 8% for the years after that. But the base becomes when they give a 12%, that is the base for LCFF, and it just will continue to grow. And so our gap continues to shrink from 2021 at 16 million to this year is now at 10 million.
So the all possible to give a less than 100 million to meet everybody's money. LCFF versus whatever we are. Why is this gap here? And just so people that are listening, or watching
The difference between LCFF and property taxes, or our district, basic aid district? Yeah. Okay, so the state has a formula that they use to fund students. It is called the LCFF formula. They have a base rate, then they have a supplemental for students that are free, reduced, foster youth, homeless, and English learners. And then they have a concentration component if you are a district that is 55% or more of those for social economic. And so when you are funded on these 3 tiers for the LCFF, you get a rate of, if we were LCFF, it would be $80 million. But at San Luis Coastal, we get a percentage of all of the property taxes, just as every other district does. But our percentage of property taxes collected in the San Luis School District area is 90 million. So the difference of what our LCSF calculation would be and what we collect in property taxes makes us an excess property tax district, and that's the $10 million.
Thank you.
Okay, all right.
On your first slide, you said that the expenses were 1.2 million higher than previously expected. What was that caused by, and track what it caused by?
Oh, they decreased by almost $1 million, and it was $800 and some odd thousand. And I can tell you,
Yeah, the third line there.
let me look at them. I break it. It breaks down the difference of what it is by the different budgets. So our budget's a living, breathing document, and it's changing constantly. We're doing budget transfers based on somebody who might have materials and supplies budgeted at 50,000, and they decide they want to go on a field trip. So they're going to move money out of their materials and supplies and put it in services and operating costs. Those type of things continue to happen, but that should be an in and out. When you see the fund balance increase, decrease, like I'm showing on that first slide, which was 859,000. What that is we have done budget transfers and we hit carryover, which is called our fund balance. Excess money that is hit, that has been carried over from one year to another, or it could just be an expenditure that's come up that hasn't been accounted for because we didn't know about it at budget development or first interim or whatever the case may be. So we have different changes, and this breaks down where all the changes happened and what budgets were affected by it. Does that help?
So you're saying kind of natural budget fluctuation?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you'll see,
It's less than 1%. I'm just curious if there's anything specific to the quarter.
no, it's just kind of how the budget evolves as we make adjustments to how we're spending our budget. And you'll see at first interim, that one is very different than the budget because we have money that we don't fully expend in the current year that carries over to the next year. And you'll really see a big swing there. And we break it all down again so that you can see where all the changes took place.
Thank you.
So there's four budget cycles, Brian, during the course of the year. So the board votes on a budget in really end of May, beginning of June for the following year, not knowing for sure where we're at, because we don't get our property taxes until November of the following year. So we estimate what we think it's going to be. Pass the budget, goes through, the governor makes changes, we find out what those are in June, July. In this case, it's positive for us this year, because we got this extra one-time funds. But we didn't know that at budget development. Then in September, we do actually unaudited actions, where that is the breakdown of exactly what we received and expended. That's every September. That's really like the true budget for the year prior. Then we do first interim, which Katie just said, November, kind of again, really first update, then we do second interim tonight, and then we go back into budget development. So, for instance, we just learned that the governor in a common message, basically, so we all the kind of CBOs get together and what are we hearing? They said, hey, take out the other 50% of the instructional materials, art, music, quadrant. We also learned that they finally gave us a transportation formula. So we took out 2.6 million, you add 1.3 million. So that kind of happens throughout the year as we get information, as we unfold. Now, I will tell you one other thing that's weird about school districts and these budgets. The state makes you, when you get this ELO funding, for example, or even those grants, let's say $5 million in expanded learning opportunities. That money goes into revenues. And they also make us put it in expenditures, even though we're not going to spend it and haven't spent it yet. So it's a false sense about what the bottom line is going to be when you see this, right? So this second interim today said that our fund balance is going to be by 1.3 million. And I'm going to share a 10-year budget document right now that says it's going to increase by 11 million. Because the state makes us put everything into expenditures. When in reality, I know based on previous years and what we spent, the reality of what those expenditures are going to be. Okay? So that's why the 10-year projection is actually a good thing, right? To look at, to show, because when I took this job, employees would look at me and say, what? Like we read your budget, said 1.3 million, and you got 11 million left at the end of the year. You're lying to us, right? You're hiding money, you're doing things. So that's why we came up with this 10-year projection to have a much more authentic look at where we think we're going to end, right? So the 10-year budget, first page revenues, second page expenditures, okay? And it breaks down those sources of revenues, right? So the first one, as Mr. Buckman pointed out, as Edie said, is our property tax. That's our main source of revenue for the school district. You know, if we were a water class and we were in CMR, property tax would fill it up about 3/4, and then the state would fill the glass. In San Luis Coastal, our property taxes flow over the glass. right? The state doesn't have to pitch in, and we get to keep that extra water, right? That has, since again, the last 9 years, that's shrinking. And 10 million seems like a lot, but when you have a budget of 140 million now, 10 million is less of a percentage, right? So it's all kind of how you look at that. That line has gotten much closer that Katie's showing in terms of LCFF, especially if they give that large COLA next year again. So again, it breaks it down into the federal funding sources we receive. We have the state funding sources we receive and the local funding sources. The things I would point out to the board, right, that are critical is everything that's in blue is one-time funds. So we have to be very cautious, very diligent about having ongoing personnel costs for things that are one-time. The item that is in green, the state a few years ago, 6 years ago, wanted credit for the money they paid towards retirement costs for certain benefits. So they make us put this amount in for the state for what we get in revenues, as well as expenditures. So honestly, those two lines you'll see in revenues and expenditures, they just balance out. They're really meaningless. We don't even need to really have them, but the state requires that we put those in if they want credit for the amount of money that they pay towards retirement. So you can see that the big things, a lot of COVID funding, you got this huge potential 10.8 million in one-time grants, which may now drop a few $1 million if the governor does take away those funds. So that will change, right? And then of course the Diamond Canyon settlement, you'll see that's another big one over the next 2 years, which is again helping us because each year Diamond Canyon has been depreciating the plan, which again affects that overall property tax number at the top. So those are, those are the key revenue sources for the school district that are there. Again, those blue are super important that we're careful with in terms of those one-time costs. I'm hopeful that the ELO funds that we received will continue. It seems like it's a priority for the governor. Short of some major budget catastrophe happening, I'm hoping that he continues those. For our school district, that will mean summer school for our elementary students. And next year, it'll be free before and after school care for all of our English language learners, our foster home youth, as well as our economically disadvantaged. Right, that's what those funds will go to. So again, you'll see we have this dramatic increase in revenues for this 1 year, then it drops back down to normal right after those one-time funds are done. So it's a little bit of an abnormality in that normally we try to shoot for kind of a personnel cost ratio because we are at people with of 85%. If the school district is around 85% personnel costs, that's a healthy place to be. If you get up into high 80s and the 90s, then you don't have money for materials and supplies and new buses and all the other things that we need to do as a school district. So it's something we've been cautious of. Now this year it looks a little off, right? It's lower than normal because of those one-time funds. But if you just do the calculation next year, it goes right back up into those 80, the 80 realm as we move forward, right? So the next one is really expense. We highlight a couple of things on expenses, right? STIRS and PERS in particular, as Katie pointed out, that was something that the governor put on school districts. Okay, so we used to pay 7%, as Katie said, for STIRS or PERS retirement. That's the district contribution. The employee also pays. So because the number of people employed, people are living longer, they had to increase the funding for that. So they put that on the school district to do. So that's a 22% raise we could have given to staff. But it's going to go towards pension, right? On top of the PERS going up to 30% for all of our classified employees, we also pay Social Security. So 37%, 38% of just the retirement costs, not benefits, health benefits, just retirement. So again, and listen, having a great retirement is one of the benefits of working in personal district and public employment, right? It's a great thing. So the fact that it's going to be paid for, the fact that we're paying for it, but people need to understand the total compensation that goes into employees. It is is based on that. So every time that number goes up, in order to stay in that 85%, we may have to cut some positions to make sure we stay in that area, right? Or hopefully property taxes go up and we maintain. Okay, and you have to, there's no raise that's built into, you know, we have a contract for 3 years, that's built into this. There's nothing built into that. So those are all things we have to consider when we negotiate and move forward. So again, we've highlighted those yellow strands, because those are the things that we've seen dramatic increases the past few years moving forward. And so what you'll see is we have a relatively, you know, again, we had that kind of strange deficit last year because the audit made us look at the valuation of the county properties, right? And then we were able to, that same amount of money got put right back into the budget July 1. So kind of just an accounting aspect of it, but you'll see we have this, again, a good balance for this next year, right? Because of those one-time funds we received, that may drop a couple $1 million based on what the governor does with the grant. And then you'll see we have these red deficit marks potentially out into the future. So those are things that we're going to have to look at and consider. We added a lot of staff with COVID funds and to make up and added counseling and intervention services and PSS. My class size is really low. You know, the district class size is really low during this time. But those are things that starting next year, when we begin to look at our next 3-year LCAP, we're going to have to really look at what are the things that are making the biggest impact on our kids. Because we'll have to do what we have to do in order to bring our budget in line, right? Hopefully, in next November, property taxes will be really high then, and then we'll adjust this, right? And so those are things that, again, it's every year outside of the last 2 years, those are exact numbers. That's what we've got revenues, that's what we expect. That is unaudited actuals. This year, we kind of each interim will update it with what we know, where we at, what's going on, to kind of make those again projections. But this has been, I think, a much better tool for the board to have a reality look at kind of where we're at. 4 years ago, when Diablo Canyon shut down, that number was about 10 million on the audit. So we are in a much better place than we were a few years ago, partially because property taxes have risen dramatically in the past few years to assist with that.
Mr. Buckman?
So I might be asking the same question in a different way, but so your first slide said we had 139 million in expenses. This one says we had 127 million in expenses, right?
No, it's 139, the very bottom. Oh, excuse me, yes. Yes.
So what is the difference to that again, and which should I care about?
I would say that.
Okay.
Right, so the reality is we have
the answer is the county. I mean,
so again, the state, SAC software, if we receive $5 million in the arts music grant, they make us put it in as an expenditure in the SAC form that we have to send off. Now, the reality is we're not going to spend $5 million. We're in the expenditure side, we're only saying we're going to spend 1.5 million. So this is more of a reality number.
This is closer to cash flow than it's supposed to do accounting.
No, not cash, the way government gets money, but what it's recognizing is, so when I'm presenting off what he's talking about, our budget that's in our financial system, and the state wants to say, if, for example, we have the expanded learning educator effectiveness grant. It was $2 million. We are going to spend that money over several years, probably 3 years. So we know we're going to, of the $2 million we received in 22-23, we're actually only going to spend about 350,000, hopefully 400,000. So we know that 1.6 million is not going to be spent. So what we do on the 10-year is we take that expense out. And so the revenue hits the bottom line where he's saying that 11 million, it hits down there because we've reduced the expense. The other grant we got was we got a dual language that was 400,000. He's only spent like 50,000 of that. So you reduce, we do our best estimate and say, hey, what do we think we're going to end the year? Maybe we'll spend 50,000. So 350 worth of expenditures, and it usually comes out of the total services and operating costs. We do a lot of contract services, and it doesn't mean we're hiring people necessarily. It could be software, it could be going on or doing professional development. And so when you look at total services and operating costs, it's a lot of different things that go into that. But anyway, we reduce that line typically. That's where we put all of the excess. So when we have multi-year grants that we know we're not going to spend, I do an estimate of all those grants and say, okay, these 8 grants are going to carry money over. We're going to reduce those expenses in the current year, which in our financial system, we're not allowed to do, and in the state software we're. So that's why the 10-year looks different than what you saw in the beginning. Does that make
The
sense?
personnel cost should be pretty close
Yeah.
to reality.
Yeah, maybe close that out.
Oh, yeah.
Well, so maybe the pertinent point I'm getting out of my head then is, at the beginning, you said we ended with 25 million, and in the 10 years, we ended with 36 million. And how much money we have at the start of next year really seems like the most relevant topic. So how much money do we have at the start of next year?
Closer to 36 million.
Okay, the 25,
Is if we were to, if we were.
if you spent everything,
Every-
you're not actually spending it all, so
Yeah.
it's started.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we know from previous history that we're not going to.
Okay.
So similar question, I guess. When I started looking, there's several places where we talk about data salary. And we look at it across the chart. And Katie really tried to help us. And so when we look at it, in the first interim report, we just stated salary were about 50 million in 2022. 23 it was 51, 24 was 53, but in the 10-year projected it was a lot less. And I guess I don't know which number to pay attention to. The 10 years, and why is it?
Yeah, I guess I'd have to see where you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I can take it.
Yeah, what that number is.
So slide 6 of the interim report.
So this is the one that Katie just shared earlier.
Yeah, it's in page 6 of the intro, and then we go to the 10 years.
And what page was it?
I don't know the page number, no, I knew that, that's a slide 6.
Right here.
Down a little further. More.
So this
One set, and maybe one.
certificated salary, right? That should be very similar to the city.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So you keep going down, that right there.
Okay. So 49,273,
Yeah, 51, 53. If you go to the 10-year,
49,111. So I guess it's pretty close.
and I want to
Total.
on the 10-year projection, not only yet, instead of the 46.
We have to add that, you have to add the hourly that should do the substitute as well. To get to the 49,111.
Well,
Okay, so when you're looking at that multi-year again is based off SAC. So it assumes that all of the salaries that are entered into the budget, which could be for subs, extra hourly, all of that. SAC says, okay, you spent 49,273, whatever it was on that multi-year.
yeah,
It takes that number and I have to use that number in 23-24. So you're saying our 23-24 number grows bigger than what's on the 10-year. And that's because that assumes again that we're taking all of the salaries we have budgeted and we're fully expending them. So we must carry them forward into the next year. And then it makes us do that for the third year out. And that is just and goes back to Ryan's point of why we do the 10-year is to reflect more of reality of the school district versus what the state box has put us in.
so when I just, I look at page 4 of the SAC, it's like 36.
Remember, you took page 14, I think it is, to make sure you get combined, unrestricted and restricted.
Don't only get one.
one piece of it. So I think if you go further down, you'll see that it's combined, and then those numbers will be, they'll match exactly the first column on that multi-year projection in the report. And then that number automatically is the beginning number for 23-24, and then I add a 3% raise. Yeah, 3% raise, and about 1.9% for certificated salaries, and about 5% for classified salaries for staff and column. And then it takes that final number, and it moves it to the 24 to 25.
But here's what I'm gonna say, and I think we just sort of interrupt, and that's, the best thing that I can use as a board member is to look at the multi-year projection.
The 10 years.
The 10-year multi-year projection. Okay.
The others are required, statutory requirements that I have to do, but the 10-year is based off historical data, what the district tends to trend at.
And again, 2021 on this, 21-22 on audit actions is what we received. Is what we spent. So those are real numbers, right? And you can imagine how hard it is for Katie to make the multi-year budget work when she has to use the SAC formula and it's not real. And you know, when you can't, like we do with the 10-year, where we take these out, we move these around, we make it, you know, kind of reality projection, because it's not, you know, people leave, people retire, you have different salaries, right? There's a lot that happens between the kind of budget projection versus the end of the day. So
And I'll tell you, so I need that number, like it's work out. But when I look at the 10-year budget projections, there's so many of these line items that you get to adult ed. It's just like, it's the same number of six years.
because Katie's went back 10 years and seen what that average of that amount has been.
Okay.
And just,
That's the best.
we guesstimate, project
That's the
what we think it's gonna be, and we know that can change, right? So something like ELO funding, we knew we didn't spend it last year, this year we know we're gonna spend. So that, you know, there are things that we will adjust, change, utilities in particular, like we said, those services and operations have increased dramatically over the past year because of that, utilities, all the things that Katie talked about, the ELO funds being utilized in summer school, so you will see some changes to that, but then after that, we would anticipate that it stays about the same, right? So it's, again, kind of our best guess and looking at what the budget's gonna be in the future. And so it again, gives you projects for the board kind of where we're at, what we're looking at. It's nothing to freak out about, worry about, right? We're in a good place where we're at, but you know, when we're talking with our employees and negotiate and things like that, it's really important to kind of make sure we have a clear view of the future, right? Where we may end. So.
Are there any other questions from the board before I move on? This is an action item, and I'd like to.
I did have, I'm located on the SAC report. We talked about the loss, there was a loss of 81 students between P1 and P2. And then got down, it was about 60 students after Katie's intervention. Is that a normal current for students? During the school year, like 60 students? I know you did this already.
Wow.
See, I throw something, it's just a lot of kids.
Yeah, so what happened between P1, well, first interim, I should say, P1 didn't happen until January. So what the page you were looking at, the attendance page was, when I had to do first interim, I was estimating where I thought our P1 attendance would come in at, based off what was in Aries. Then P1 happens in January, it's months 1 through 4, and the sites go through, they scrub their data, and they look for, our biggest thing right now is our independent study. So they go through and they make sure that they have all the contracts with the students, that the students turn in the work. So when they did that, the difference between what I grabbed at the end of October, because the interim goes through October 31st, and then once the data was clean, was that 60 students. And also, the other piece of that, I will say, I think it was 80 students, to be honest, but 10 of them were county. We did not have as many students in the county programs that we had in the prior year. So, but that we never know until we're a little bit further here. However, I think we're going to see in P2, which ends in April, is in February, a lot of these independent study contracts we know are going to clear, and we actually think we're going to see that bump up. So it'll be almost a net zero. So but it's all tiny. We have 8 months to get the data perfect, and changes happen in months 1 through 4, and then we report again at the end of April, and we still have another opportunity to revise that if needed in July, but we try not to do that. It's usually what we report in April, what we want to land.
We did see a significant decline in students with COVID. So for a couple of years, we did see that, and we are seeing those students return now. So we have had an uptick, I would say, over the past 2 years. Yes, there's defined in budget, projection part, but we're still up from where we were last year and definitely the year before that. But stable, I would say, student population. Not from the enrollments. And this is the ADA base, correct?
Yes, that's attendance, not enrollment.
So it's based on the actual, it's not, you don't really know that until you get the actual numbers.
Any other questions from the board? Anyone from the public wishing to address the board on this topic? Seeing no one, this is the national item, this resolution. Hi, Mr. Buckman.
Yes.
Mr. Overview, yes. Mr. Banfield.
Yes.
Mr. Clausen.
Yeah.
Mrs. Rogers. Mr. Unger.
Yes.
And I am yes. Motion carried. Thank you. And next is item 9.02, another resolution moving the reduction in specified.
Yeah, so we, Measure D, we had set up a kind of a new classified management structure, had made a position, for this position that we're asking you now to take away, to delete, which was kind of an assistant director, facilities director. For the next bond measure and through the construction management, I think for the district, our focus is really to have dedicated project managers. They're not doing other duties on top of what they're doing. And so with that, tonight is really just to levy the board, that we approved this position in 2014. Now this position will be unfilled. So it basically just kind of removes it from the management schedule.
Are there any questions from the board? Any questions from the public? Seeing no one, again, this item is an action item. Someone like to make a motion? Looking at you, Mr. Member.
So.
Mr. Unger.
Yes.
Mr. Buckman.
Yes.
Mr. Banfield.
Yes.
Mr. Clausen.
Yes.
Ms. Silver, yes. Thank you very much. I am going to suggest that the board take a 10-minute break. Please be back on time. We start on the way. Thank you.
Restrooms are out to the right.
Everyone through most board members could like sit down for that.
Right again. All right, thank you. I'm going to rely on our amazing secretary, Professor Jane Holly, taking the phone this evening, and she's going to actually share a screen and move the slide along while I present. So I appreciate all of the help. This evening, we're going to talk about the secondary achievement report with a specific focus on mathematics. And so I really appreciate Mr. Pinkerton and Mrs. Frank and Rob for arithmetic and numbers. So bear with us and we start to work through our presentation. When we start to talk about NDTP, and in true fashion, we all want to break down what that acronym stands for. We're talking about the mathematics diagnostics testing project that comes out of UC San Diego. And our MDTP, truly what I want to focus on is a diagnostic assessment. So think about it from the perspective of the student. At the beginning of the school year, August, the students are set. We want to see where the students are at in their mathematical reasoning, in the foundation math courses that they're enrolled in currently. So it's not a summative assessment, it's not a gotcha assessment, it's an assessment where we use wrong, so where the kids at. And then we want to reassess the student with that same diagnostic tool a few months later. And then we want to compare the data, because obviously we want to see, we will measure what our levels of proficiency as the student enters the course, and then as they progress through the course, what the growth opportunities. Ideally, the MDTP should be given approximately 4 times a year. If you're looking at the UC San Diego recommendation, we should have a diagnostic assessment for the course that the students are currently enrolled in. Then we should give that reassessment a few months later. And then we should give the next assessment as they start to spiral into the course that they're going to attend or enroll in the following year. And then the final assessment we beginning of the year. But this is the common assessment that we give for our 6th grade students, or 7th grade students, 8th grade students, 9th grade in Algebra 1, in geometry, Algebra 2, and only in pre-calculus. There is also an NDTP that is also around calculus. But this evening, we really want to focus on the NDTP as it pertains to 7th grade accelerated, 8th grade accelerated, algebra, geometry, algebra 2. That's a broad overview. In this particular slide, you can see the full administration for the current math course, the winter administration, which we just finished for the current math course, and we're able to compare the data. That's the data we're going to focus on this evening. And then the spring assessment will be given in May, early June, as we enter the end of the year. When we look at our 7th grade students, those are students that obviously have loans and lands and taking the MDTP in August. We want to look at what percentage of those students that took that diagnostic met or exceeded their proficiency level. And the proficiency level engaged by 70% or above on that assessment. Remember, it's a diagnostic. It's not a gotcha. It's not a situation where it's going to go in the grade book. It's going to be a situation where teachers are going to be able to use this and then disaggregate the data to be able to figure out where are the gaps in learning and how do we augment and fill those gaps as we work our way through the curriculum. And at the same time, understand that there's going to be standards that are going to be in future lessons that they haven't exposure to yet. That might be in a question or two on the MDTP. When we look at the percent breakdown, we're seeing here just why we see it within the middle school and the growth, and we see loans and the growth. Our next slide wanted to break down significant subgroups. I think it's very important to emphasize that one of the charges by our school board is to focus on closing the achievement gap. How do we disaggregate our data so that we are always looking at what are we all, and then what are those significant subgroups? Are we seeing growth 5% in 1 year? And are we seeing growth increased for those significant subgroups to actually tackle those achievement gaps? And here for the acronyms, if the all is the first column, the non-socioeconomic disadvantage is the second column. SDD is the socioeconomic disadvantage. EL, English learners, ARPAN,
We designate them English proficient, and SLCUSD students with disabilities. So in each of these situations, we want to see are the students showing growth in this assessment from one period to the other, and then by what measurement, or what percentage are showing additional growth. And there's some real areas of growth that we're seeing in this particular cohort of seventh grade students. When you look at RPAT, we're going to call out to the work that's been done at both of our middle schools with regard to those students who are reclassified doing English proficient. But you're also seeing growth for students who are socioeconomic disadvantaged and EL. Now, obviously, we understand that we have still work to do, but it is a positive trend that we've seen across the board with regard to our seventh grade students in the assessment. As we look at our seventh grade accelerated data, we're starting to see a great celebration also or opportunities to celebrate. We're seeing growth between the first assessment in August and then the second assessment in late December, early January, and both of our school. It should also be pointed out as we go into the disaggregated data on the next slide. The growth overall for the students that are enrolled in our seventh grade accelerated course. I will front load and tell you that one of the things that we're really super excited about is an increase in the number of students who are now enrolled in our seventh grade ACT accelerated course of both loans and lenders. It's an intentional process. We're really trying to have additional opportunities for all students to have that opportunity to be in an accelerated math class starting in seventh grade. With the eighth grade, and we see our eighth grade students here. We looked at our proficiency level again August, and then we look at it again in January, and we're seeing again growth for our students in eighth grade regularly. Now, I will tell you this: we met with our sixth grade teachers a couple of weeks ago. Wonderful work by Mr. Mayfield, the statistic, Chelsea Smiley, our host, working with our sixth grade teachers. And then we met last week with our seventh grade lead math teachers from Laguna and Malls. And we had some of our leads from sixth grade as well. And one of the conversation pieces was about the interconnectedness from a standards perspective and the teaching that's going on between sixth grade and seventh grade especially. And then in eighth grade is kind of like a little bit of a new frontier, especially when it comes to eighth grade math. So there's a lot of connection between the sixth and seventh, but then we still have our work to do as we get into eighth. The next slide, when we talk about eighth grade ACC, which is our advanced course, there are two middle schools. Just wait for June to catch up with me. So when we're looking at our eighth grade accelerated data, we're seeing proficiency levels that once the students are in this course, we're seeing our students having great success. And I attribute that to the work of the teachers at World Middle School, as they are preparing students for their path toward high school. I will also tell you that one of the pieces that we're working with the middle school teachers on is to modify and rename the sports ACT 8th grade to Algebra 1. So one of the courses that we're going to be bringing to you next evening will be to modify that to Algebra 1. Yes, Mr. Member.
Our seventh grade students typically moving, our seventh grade accelerated students moving typically to eighth grade accelerated students, or if they're not, if they get to the end of seventh grade accelerated students, it's like, oh, you know, what we were seeing before was not the same proficiency level that we're seeing here. Are those students then dropping back into something else?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I can gather your question. Are we seeing students who complete seventh grade accelerated and transition to eighth grade accelerated?
Yes.
The answer to that is yes.
There's one way to it, so I guess maybe we'll talk about this. But what's the big difference between what we saw up there with seventh grade accelerated math and where we're seeing them in eighth grade accelerated math? This is tremendous.
Yeah, it's a great question. So think about it this way: our kids that are eighth grade accelerated math are actually completing Algebra 1 plus middle school. And so our cohort of students that are in seventh grade accelerated move into eighth grade accelerated. As long as they maintain a C average and they're showing that ability to communicate and finish the math curriculum, and teachers have that from them, and the vast majority of them actually complete the seventh ACT and then transition to eighth grade ACT as well.
So the answer is yes to your question. So one of the things that we talked about probably 6 or 7 years ago was how to qualify for accelerated math. It sounds like we loosened that a little bit in order to have more students take accelerated math. Is that correct? Yeah, so 6, 7, 8 years ago, one of the pieces of puzzle we put together for students to qualify as entrance to accelerated was 4 that's not bad. And to have 80% or better on the NDTP for enrollment in the accelerated. When we come out of COVID, Mrs. Frost and the principals at the middle school, we really wanted to take a real hard look at the students and their enrollment in the 7th grade accelerated. What we started to see was a situation where coming out of COVID, there were a lot of students coming into the middle schools in 7th grade who may have had a 3 on their SBAC, who may have had a 72 to 75% on an NDTP. But because of the nature of what had gone on the previous 16, 18 months in COVID, we felt that the students would be strong enough to compete in the 7th grade accelerated. I will tell you that the sweet spot tended to fall around the 26th. They're going to cut score on that side. And as we started last year with the 7th grade accelerated cohort, we actually had approximately about 95 to 99 students of Laguna enrolled in the 7th grade accelerated, and we had about 34 to 35 kids enrolled in the accelerated program in Falls. I will tell you that at Laguna, there was close to 30 students who previously 6, 7 years ago may not have qualified based on the metric of 4 and an 80%. However, I will tell you that about 25 of that 30 that were now in the program were being successful, meaning that they were achieving at grade level, they were at an A or B in the class and showing proficiency marks. As we transition those 7th graders now to 8th grade, they're sticking with the program and they're being successful as we go. So this year, our current 7th grade, we have approximately 59 to 60 kids involved in the 7th grade accelerated using that metric, and we have 140 plus on Laguna. So all of a sudden, we've gone from having 1 section of accelerated loans and 3 sections of Laguna to having 5 sections of Laguna and 2 sections of loans. The reason why that's super important is coming from the high school world, we know that there are multiple entry points for students to have the opportunity to have accelerated experiences in math. It opens all sorts of doors to them as they move through high school. It's one of the almost unspoken rules when we talk about A3G approval rates, when we talk about college entrances, when we talk about college preparedness, and most importantly, college competitiveness. So we're seeing a trend that we like, that we need to support. So does this, I believe that the AG requirement for math is 3 years, is that correct? But you've got the preferences for 4 years, and there was some concern about students not being able to get the 4-year advanced calculus based on the same sort of metrics. So is this one way that we're helping students get to that place? Yes, the short answer is absolutely yes. So when we looked at our math progression 6, 7, 8 years ago, we had first math progression. We looked at how is it that we can have 40 to 50 students at the high school level enrolled in Cal BC, if it's all possible. But we always wanted to keep in the back of mind the experience of 4 years were possible in the A through G. So in the advanced courses that students have the potential to take a program more advanced, so I would be Cal BC, Cal AB, and AP statistics. They also have pre-cal honors and pre-cal, which could be viewed as that 4th year of continuing math to make them super competitive. But you're absolutely right. But this progression through 7th grade accelerated and 8th grade accelerated is just one entry point. The second entry point could be summer school. The opportunity for students to be able to have a course in math and summer school. So we see enrollment in summer school in geometry, but a lot of our students are going to have an accelerated program where they will be directly as an integrated into Algebra 2, but also be offered Algebra 1. So a student may come with not necessarily in the ACC, but they complete Algebra 1 over summer, and now they're entering this into geometry. So you're absolutely correct. We're always trying to provide those on-ramps for students to have this opportunity. Mr. Butler.
Thanks, Chris. Just for something I make a direct correlation to the presentation of the federal budget. That might be too much tonight. I'm wondering, I'm very excited about ACP advancement. They're incredible. And I know that we made some changes, as Chris pointed out, in terms of enrollment in the ACT program, but how can we manage changes for the non-ACT students? The growth that's
Yeah, you know, it's a process, I will say that. I will also say that a piece of the work that we're still having to do is to really spend time disaggregating the data, having the time to really move into what are the gaps that we're seeing, and then thinking about systems and structures to really support our students in middle school. You know, a lot of times when we talk about MTS, we're talking about a lot of systems and support, especially at the lower grades, but we're really doing these conversations in middle school now. How do we support students in math specifically at the lower grades?
Yeah, and so we talked earlier when this week about this, and I don't really understand we talked about sixth grade and seventh grade. It's how do we talk about the link between the fifth and seventh grade? That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's a great question. Vertical articulation. So these conversations are taking place now between our sixth grade and our seventh grade. Super exciting. Last week we were in Boston that conversation. Sitting in the room when we're talking about scope and sequence. So we're having our sixth grade teachers talk about the scope and sequence of the work that they're completing in CPM. And then they're meeting with the seventh grade teachers and we're gonna add longs saying, can you help us? Is the scope and sequence that we're laying out here sufficient? Are we putting enough emphasis and time to these specific standards that address areas that students will need in the seventh grade and beyond? And it's fascinating during those conversations because the seventh grade, eighth grade math leads are helping guide our sixth grade teachers around what specific standards, and how much time and energy do they have to put into specific math concepts that will help them in algebra, geometry, and beyond. The second piece is we're hearing a lot of feedback with regards to the need for fractions, really focusing into that fourth and fifth grade with that fraction. And so building these conversations with boys. A second piece of the puzzle is how could we build a professional development opportunity in the summer and into next year for our seventh and eighth grade math teachers and sixth grade to really have an opportunity to learn the content as well as the skills to really hone their skills as they're teaching math throughout. So those are the conversations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Frost.
One clarification question. Do the math 8 and the math 8 accelerated be the same proficiency test, or are they measured on different proficiency scale?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the students that are enrolled in the math 8 ACT will be taking a different assessment than the students that are enrolled in math 8 itself. And that's laid out by the UTP.
Okay, then, so if you take math 8 and UTP as an example, if the numbers are growing, you can call the winner, but is there like an absolute target? I mean, what's a good outcome from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. The target would be 100% efficiency, right? Because we want to make sure that the students, and it's important because the students have to be mastering the standards of the course that they're in to be able to be adequately prepared for the next course that we're about to enter. That would be the target. But it also gives us an opportunity to recognize and realize where are those gaps in the learning for the students and how can we show those up. Those are the conversations that we are taking that are taking place as well.
So with the math 8 at 39% and the accelerated at 96%, how do you characterize that difference? Or I think what are the top terms?
Yeah, one of the struggles is when you carve off a group of students who are in that accelerated piece, CPM as a curriculum. It's around best practices, using role models, it's using teacher student leaders. It's that collaborative conversation. So one of the juxtapositions that you're forced into is a situation where you're taking the students maybe out of that class environment where they could be student leaders within that class to be able to lay great roles and great foundational practices to their colleagues and their fellow students. That's a piece of the puzzle also. But also we have to show up how we're bringing other supports. Do we have in Laguna as an example? We have a co-teaching opportunity where we have two gen ed math teachers teaching in the same group. And then we're analyzing the data and we work with that with the students in regular or eighth grade math itself. So we're always looking to figure out the strategies that are best suited to the needs of the kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this looks to be fairly effective for staff. They're using the MDTP. How long have we been?
Yeah, we used the MDTP for approximately the last 6 to 7 years, obviously, yeah, after the COVID. And obviously, as we build in that common assessment process, if you go way back, the underneath the math progression, there was a period of time where we started out with regard to, I think it was the Silicon Valley Math Initiative. We're using some assessments there, but the MDTP, getting that on the same page, all of our teachers, all of our schools, so they can understand the progression of the work. We will usually go
Maybe I'm very, it sounds like it's still evolving.
It's still evolving in the fact that we want to make sure that we find time and resources to be able to make it manageable and useful for our teachers and also for our students. One of the pieces of feedback that we get from our teachers is we love what we're doing. We just need some time to do this aggregated data, like figure out where are those gaps and how do we solve the problems that we're seeing in our classes. And again, the final piece is it's a diagnostic. It's an opportunity to check in where the students are at, knowing that they may not have exposure to all of the content standards yet in the course of study. You're welcome. We can go on to the next slide. Again, we have the breakdown disaggregated. Here, we're going to algebra 1 and possible page. So again, now as we enter algebra 1, we're talking about students from high school to high school, families high, and more away high school. So when we look at our data here, we're saying, okay, as the students enter high school and as they progress through the first few months, how are they showing proficiency? What work do we have to do? And this is where we're seeing, as we look at disaggregated data, we're seeing teacher teams can put together what the Semblance High and more away, where they're really looking at the standards, they're really looking at what is it that we need the students to really have exposure to, and how much growth we have. And I want to call out more away specifically with regard to that growth over time. When we look at our RFEP students at more away, they have a strong teacher team. That's the other Ryan Turner, their development chair. They're really looking at how do we best serve the needs of all of our students, but it's a celebration of sorts also. So when we see significant growth and closing gap, especially amongst the group of students, we have to celebrate them. We're not there yet in every single group, but when we do see it, we have to make sure we bring that to both staff and the board. And geometry, obviously we have an assessment for our geometry students to think about this 10th grade students primarily. But we also have 9th grade students who are enrolled in geometry. Remember, when they're coming out of the middle schools, they could then be enrolled in geometry as 9th graders, or this could be a cohort of 10th grade students. And again, we want to make sure that we look at the diagnostic early in the year, and we look at growth over time. It goes with the disaggregated gene. Again, we're seeing that opportunity for growth. It's not where we want it to be right now, but I would again call out more away next to doing a fantastic job in that growth for non-socioeconomically disadvantaged students, but also again for our students with disabilities. Again, this is an opportunity for staff and to celebrate, but also to lean into and to look at what is going on in the geometry classes. What are the strategies? What are the team dynamics to really help support kids? Mr. Butler.
So as we're going through, I keep noticing that the EL starts at 0% and stays at 0% and improves to 0%. And I'm just afraid that somebody can take this and say, well, kids that don't speak English can't learn math. And that's a scary thought, because we could talk about, I think, what we're doing at EL, and there's the opportunity there, and then explain where our needs come from, and that improvement doesn't stay Because I think that I explain what I think to be a misconception.
Sure. So sometimes, when we look at our EL students or our students, think about a student or a group of students who may have been with us since kindergarten. So they enrolled as kinder students, they've been in our school system years and they're supposed to since kindergarten, and now they're in seventh grade, eighth grade, and ninth grade. They still may be classified as an EL student. They may not have been classified at this point. They're still classified as EL. Maybe for a variety of reasons, they just haven't met that mark. But we also have a group of students who do meet that mark and are being classified as fluent English proficient. The student that's reclassified as fluent English proficient also have an efficiency level, but I would argue that they've also met a mark of being intrinsically motivated. There's a measure of executive function that goes with that. And there are a lot of times students that are in our habit program that basically at the middle of high school, and they want to go somewhere. They tend to be from a gender perspective, they could be female. So I want to keep that as a frame, right? Our EL students, when they're in a math class that focuses from CPM, it's very word heavy, very text heavy. There's a lot of word problems, there's a lot of language. And math is itself is a language, but when you compound that with a lot of word problems, they're trying to work their way through all of those kind of permutations. I will tell you from first-hand experience, Mr. Butler, we at San Luis Obispo High School were very fortunate to hire a bilingual math teacher 3 years ago. Wonderful, awesome teacher. And our goal at that time was to dual immersion math. Our thought process around that time was imagine we could offer Algebra 1 in Spanish. That was our premise going in. Because we felt like a lot of the kids who were coming from our dual immersion school at that time in Chaco would be really well served by being in this dual immersion. But what we found in reality was we have a lot of our dual immersion students in Algebra 1 who were English learners, but our students who were dual immersion students who were not English learners were already in geometry. They had advanced in that point. And what we witnessed was a Spanish-speaking teacher now teach algebra in Spanish for students, and they were able to start to slowly comprehend the material because of the word base, just the language itself was so text heavy. We're seeing success with that. It would be wonderful if we could go out and hire many bilingual math teachers. That would be fantastic because we can start to tackle the word problem that with regard to something. So that's just a broad overview from that perspective.
Let me see if I can, what I heard is if we could be teaching the EL students this complicated math in Spanish, we might be seeing a better growth.
I would say, yeah, I'd say complicated math. I'd say it's very text heavy, very language heavy. Because math is universal language, right? And so just the fact that it's text heavy is something we have to come down to go on. Mr. Matthew?
Well, because of the echo and because my hearing is so, we probably already discussed that this question. Why does it appear that our coastal students are not achieving at the same rate as our families and students? What's going on?
It's a great question. That's a question that we are delving into and dipping into with regard to our attention to loans and more of a one of the pieces that we want to look at is when you look at the seventh grade data, you have to see that we loans have about 165 seventh grade students on average. When we do the assessment, we have 55 to 60 students go qualify for math 7 ACD. We're taking those students, and that's a celebration. We're doing really well with them. In our seventh grade regular class, we've got that 100 group. And one of the pieces of the puzzle that we're working with Mr. Blue and Mr. Contreras on is how do we build a connection with regard to our sixth grade teachers and with loans with our seventh grade and eighth grade so they can check and fill the gaps where they need to be. It's a process. We've just started that process, but we're very aware of it because it goes back to that vertical alignment. We want to make sure that our middle school teachers, especially in the coast, are working directly with our high school teachers, and they know where the students need in order to be successful. So it's not there yet, but it's something we're working through by bringing this data to their attention. And again, as a celebration, when we look at the success of our post-school students in ARPA, specifically at Morway, ARPA, in Algebra 1, ARPA in geometry, we're seeing a teacher team at Morway for doing that deep dive. Okay. Next, Jan, we can move on to Algebra 2. So here in Algebra 2, again, we're seeing that proficiency mark, which we got our student profile, coastal city. And remember, these are all of our students in Algebra 2, they're on the Algebra 2 and Algebra 2 honors. They would be in that assessment. Okay. And as we see this aggregation, again, calling out the ARPA cohort, significant subgroup, seeing that growth. Also, that significant growth with regard to our students with disabilities in Algebra 2. So commend the work of our team with regards to that. When we bring this data to our teacher teams, they're able to dial right into what that looks like in the classroom. Okay. Celebration as we move to that. We're seeing growth. We looked at it and we kept the end value here. We're seeing growth in our courses. Math 7 plus 13, Math 7, ACT plus 32. Remember, we're looking at bringing in the conversation around our learning sprints that we talked about. The work we talked about now, we talked about the work of clarity and our learning sprint, giving an assessment early in the year, and assessment a few months later to see that growth over time. Math 8 plus 9, Math 8 ACT plus 9. We're seeing Algebra 1 growth, we're seeing geometry growth in Algebra 2. So those are pieces of acceleration. When we look at our enrollment data in our seventh-grade accelerated classes, we're seeing an increase of over 30% compared to last year. So we know that when we have students have access to this advanced opportunity, they're being successful and they're meeting that mark. And again, in 8th grade, our students are sticking with it. 96% of our students are meeting those proficiency levels district-wide. And as we progress through this year, one of the things that we work with the teacher teams on is to rename our 8th grade accelerated course Algebra 1 in middle school. Next slide, Jane, please. And then what we wanted to do is we wanted to call out those specific pieces where we are addressing and closing that achievement gap, where we're closing a significant subgroup at a faster pace than the growth of district-wide overall, the growth of that students. And there are many opportunities to celebrate the work that's being done in law specifically for significant subgroups. And really commend the team at law for being able to do that. And again, we see this similar pattern in middle school and then more of being still high. And again, it's not across the board, but for significant subgroups, for them to be growing at a faster pace than the overall is something that we really want to celebrate to show other teachers. And in closing, we still have work to do. We still have work to do with regard to our 7th grade math proficiency level 8, Algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2. I think that's the plus that speaks to your question. If I what would be the idea? Well, we want to make sure that all students are proficient. Mr. Buckman, your specific question about EL students, that's an area of focus. Like, how do we keep tackling that? And then with our students with disabilities, and then narrowing that focus in math 8 and Algebra 1 as well. And then that supporting that cultural professional development, that inquiry, that learning sprint that we're having the conversations with teacher teams at all of our secondary schools. And then provide these additional opportunities. The additional opportunities for vertical articulation. I can see traction around the concept of having almost like a math academy in the summer for our 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade teachers, led by and taught by our teachers themselves to be able to guide that conversation because of that work done on scope and sequence. Because they can help guide each other as we use the MTTP, as we use the CPM curriculum, as we look at our state standards to be able to shore up those areas of proficiency or weakness that our students are seeking. And that's our presentation regarding the secondary achievement from that.
Are there any questions from the board? Are there any comments from the public? Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. I think that, I really appreciate this presentation. The bottom line is growth is occurring. And in fact, the amount of growth in most of our groups, which we all remember, is really encouraging. It speaks to our teaching staff and the hard work they're doing. I agree that I'm also very encouraged to hear the possibility of teaching mathematics in STEM so that we can provide the opportunities our EL students deserve and are seeking so that they can be on a similar path to all of the students. Well, I know that's a challenge, but there's nothing we can't tackle to assist those students and help them all students achieve. But again, the bottom line is we are experiencing growth, and I'll look forward to hearing how we get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Presentation as well. So.
You know, the presentation as well, so don't change it. So next, and then our next item is with regard to
Yes, and bringing before you guys this evening, update on our new and modified courses for our secondary schools, middle and high school. You know, I just wanted to call out to the work of our principals and assistant principals at the secondary school, working with our SLCUSD team to make sure that we're always hearing feedback from not only our board, but our community, and as we prepare the year 2023, those opportunities for our middle school students especially. You know, we've done a tremendous job with regard to our career technical education opportunities. Whether that be career, college, or community, we really need into bringing some wonderful electives to the middle school. So when we look at culinary arts and finance, when we look at engineering or an engineering field course, these are pieces of puzzle that we feel very strongly about. This comes directly from feedback. And we're always thinking about how are we connecting our middle school to our high schools with regard to our career technical education opportunities. And as we you know, bring those courses, whether it be in 7th grade wheel or 8th grade semester class, we know that where we want to be, and that's how we reimagine career technical education throughout our district. It would be wonderful in a year or two from now, where a student at middle school would actually do an introductory pathway course while in middle school before they get to high school. So that's an area of our focus. It's an area that we're exploring. As we go down into our high school courses, you can see some of the courses we've modified at San Francisco High School with regard to 3D design and craft that was previously designed. Be happy to let you know that we're bringing Studio 2D to Morway High School. We're also modifying some of our video production courses, our TNN, which is Tiger News Network, that's San Francisco High School. And a lot of this work is in alignment with our career technical education pathway courses to make sure that they are speaking the same language with regard to CalPAT. And so that's an important piece of what we're doing. Also a big shout out to the work that's being done in Slow Island with regards to the theater program. And we're really trying to build our theater program as part of the pathway at San Francisco High School. So that's been something we're very, very excited about. We also have here is a new courses on computer science seminar. The work that's being done at San Francisco High School with regard to the AP computer science principles courses that are available for students. But in order to prepare our students for the AP exam at the end of the year, we feel that we have to be able to have a preparation program available to them. We also have environmental science AP seminar. Environmental science AP was a course that the board approved a few years ago. That's being well received by our students at both of the high schools. But this specific course is to help the students attend this high school prepare for the environmental AP course. Mr. Berger, apologize. Any question? Yeah.
That I was excellent. Like correspondence, I'm excited about the CDE additions and so forth. And also the financial component to the complementary. Now, in what department are we going to make the financial and entrepreneurship more plus for both, I'm hoping middle and high school?
Yeah, so you know, it's an area that we would like to develop through one of our pathways, especially at high school. It's interesting to bring this up. The
San Marcos High School in Santa Barbara actually has entrepreneur and leadership academy program. And it's something that we are investigating and following up on, but I see the potential to add, of course, you're talking about in a pathway to the high school specifically, and then backwards mapping that potentially into the middle school.
I like the kids knowing the skills, like financial skills, not just philosophies and things like that, but things that will get them directly into the business world, and the world that will hire them, give them jobs. And knowing about money is a very important part of that. So we need to really beef that up. We talked about that in the board.
We also just, for one of our new courses, we had economics and seminar. So that's a new course that's school. Our students are taking both macroeconomics and microeconomics school. And so, of course, will be offered for those exams will be a seminar. And finally, I want to draw attention to two new courses that are offered at one day in school. Heritage Spanish 1, Heritage Spanish 2, working with Mr. Scully and his team and his department. We see a real desire and push in motivating high school to have Heritage Spanish 1 and obviously the 2 course. And we're really focusing there on those native Spanish speakers. We put into more of a history. They speak Spanish, they come from Spanish speaking families. And we want to offer them an opportunity in a course in class where they're celebrating not only the Spanish culture and heritage, but also leading into reading and writing in Spanish. With the goal, we want to see partnering with our students coming out of the dual immersion program at Baywood the next few years, the opportunity to offer perhaps a Spanish language, and maybe eventually a Spanish literature course in more high school, much in the same way as those courses are offered at San Luis High School. So we're starting that work with Mr. Spar and the World Language Department here at Oro Bay High. And so we're making these 2 courses offered to your attention this evening. And hopefully, if you don't have any other additional questions, we can bring this modified and new course description to you guys.
Mr. Plum.
Just my glass, but I actually do a question. So to these questions. To use question about financial literacy, is that something that you see addressed over time through curriculum or non-curriculum solutions? Do you think that function of the class or other things?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, first and foremost, we do tackle financial topics or areas of finance in regards to the senior level economics course. However, with that being said, there are many successful pathway courses out for us to review that's focused specifically on finance and entrepreneurship. It's that tackled both from a curricular perspective, but also it's really important to be able to find the qualified teacher to be able to teach that. That's a piece of the puzzle we always have to come back to. There has to be that career technical education certification. And so we're looking for somebody who has some industry experience in order to be able to establish that program.
Is there a specific solution you have in mind, or you're saying it's a hard? I mean, it sounds like a hard problem to solve. And is there?
Yeah, just is there a potential solution? Yes, I think there is a potential solution, but it's also one of those instances where do we have availability of staff? Do we have space in the schedule? Or do we get to a position where we're offering so much that it's almost impossible to substantiate that moving forward? Because obviously we want to make sure that we end up with a career technical education pathway in finance entrepreneurship that students will have the opportunity to complete it. So it's a delicate balance.
Before we, just there.
I had a question regarding one of these courses.
Yeah.
The instrumental music techniques. This is a design for students who would like to learn how to play an instrument as a beginner or to work on skills that would improve musicianship on a clarinet.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're delighted with the, as you know, basic band and jazz band program we want based. So this is a course that brought forward by Mr. Hogan as a delegate, because we have a lot of students who would enroll in more way on, who would like to learn how to play an instrument. But they may be only able to take band or jazz band, if that's a course, but ultimately their main objective is to be able to learn how to read music or learn how to play a single instrument that maybe isn't part of the band. So Mr. Delegate brought this course forward because he wants to provide those opportunities for students who want to have that experience and that exposure. And so that's how we really build that in is concert band, jazz band, it's a great question.
And it's my understanding that the student is interested in learning a musical instrument. All the people, the district will assist with that.
Absolutely.
People, I'll go to the public, this is the national and stuff. I just want to say before we go to a vote on this, I'm very excited. For the surprise on the board, my colleagues, to see some extension of some of our parts. It's been a while coming, and the theater, the music course, as Daniel pointed out, design, craft, and studio art. I think that's really exciting. And I strongly believe that a background in the arts greatly contributes to a well-rounded education and life experience for our students. So I'm always happy to see greater inclusion of the arts. So on that note, this is an action item to approve these new courses, which should be created and modified. Do I do a motion?
Make a motion to approve. Of course, of that.
Mr. Clausen, would you like to second this?
I would love to.
Thank you so much. Mr. Van.
Yes.
Mr. Clausen.
Yes.
Mr. Buckman.
Yeah.
Mr. Dollar. Mr. Unger.
Yes.
And I. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor.
Thank you.
Have a good night. You don't have to play your turns. Normally have it so nicely.
All right. Mr. Pinkerton.
Yes, and the infamous arts, music, and construction materials block grant that we've been talking about so much. We have to have a board approved plan for those funds. So what you're seeing in front of you is a very basic plan at this time. And so let me pull it up really quick. Close that for something. So this, and as we said, the description of the block grant, there's an interesting time because a lot of school districts around the state were really focused on getting some relief for service first. Those embedded increases that we all had, we shared earlier with the district. I think the governor politically decided that he wanted to go out and call this art, music, construction materials block grants. Which unfortunately kind of gave a false sense of what districts were going to potentially use these funds for, right? You know, I know all of our art music here, hey, great, we're getting $4.6 million left. Well, then in fine print, he basically said, oh yeah, by the way, districts can use this for operational costs. as well as for COVID. So we have a lot happening in the school district over the next few years in terms of instructional materials. We're gonna be purchasing a lot of textbooks, a lot of new social studies adoption, new adoption for English language arts for K-6. Many of the classes you just approved are going to need new materials and supplies as we move forward. So at this point, we don't have a direct spot like, hey, we're gonna pay for all the music teachers for the next 3 years out of these funds. So basically, I'm just putting this forward for the board to approve that we can expend these funds on any of the options that they have available, which is basically to support operational costs, including, not limited to, increases in employer-supported health and welfare, securities and first costs, as well as maintaining the salaries of employees and provide instructional materials for any of the following areas. So as we move forward, as the board makes decisions over the next 3 years on how we're going to move forward, again, with all of those things that we have in our budget, these funds would then just support whatever the board's decisions would be. And it pretty just kind of leaves it open for really your direction in the future. Katie will be keeping, Katie Eklund, the fiscal director, will be keeping a spreadsheet of these funds and exactly how to spend, because we will have to ensure that they do coordinate to this plan to those areas as we move forward. But as like I said, it's very important in terms of how to utilize these funds. And there's a variety of other things through LCAT, through district funding, where we buy musical instruments and we do a lot of these same things, right? So whether it's educator effectiveness grants, whether it's our expanded learning opportunities funds, whether it's these funds, it all goes to support kind of the common cause and focus and direction support. So I'm asking the board tonight to approve this plan. Again, it's pretty broad at this point because we're going to be making decisions in the future about the budget and how we're going to spend funds. So this just gives us the opportunity in the future to adjust that as needed.
Mr. Berger. Number 7, financial literacy.
Yep. Yep.
Including, I didn't look up 512. Anything else, Mr. Berger? Oh, no, you can. Any one from the public wishing to comment? This is an action item that we approve this, and must be on this will be said however best are needed.
Yes.
So we need a motion to with regard to 2.04 the block grant. Thank you. I haven't done. I make a motion that we approve the arts movement between.
That's it.
Mr. Review? Yes. Mr. Banfield? Mr. Buckman? Yes. Mr. Clausen?
Yes.
Mr. Runder?
Yes.
Next. Our award of the E-rating contract.
Yeah, so they went out and they did a bid for E-rate services, and Infinity Communications does that for the school district. We received 2 bids. Honestly, if you go into the actual network equipment part of it, you'll see that the CompU Vision bid is actually something that was not even a product that was specified. So AMS is a product that we specify the product that we utilize. And so based on the information presented in those 2 bids, it's our tech services department, Knowledge, has recommended the board move forward with awarding this E-rate bid, which is basically funds that we receive from the federal government for smart technology equipment. If you would like the board to award that bid to AMS.
Anyone from the public? Any questions or comments by the board? Seeing none. Would like to.
I'd like to make this motion, and as I do that, I'd like to just point out that, the suggestion, from IT was not just based on the dollar amount, but also overall qualifications, expertise, value, and cost effectiveness. And as we move forward, with all the bidding that we're gonna be moving, just remember, not just the bottom line. I'd like to move.
Mr. Butler,
Yes.
Ms. Miller Drew. Yes. Mr. Unger,
Yes.
Mr. Banfield,
Yes.
Mr. Clausen,
Yes.
next, item is 2.05, including the CSD delegate and assembly ballot.
Yeah, this is, for those that are new to the board, our California School Boards Association delegates are selected through votes by the local school boards. And in this case, before you tonight, is kind of a challenging vote, because both candidates, each school board only has one vote in the county, but in this case, both candidates are really exceptional delegates. They're both wonderful and respected trustees, one being from the CMR, Vicky Mayer, and the other, Dr. Nelson Yamagata from Templeton. And tonight I have before you a tricky vote to choose one of the two to move forward for the CSBA delegate assembly ballot.
Any discussion by the board? Well, as Ms. Mayor done it before, she's been on her board for long. And so, on that regard, I would tend to really give it a chance. So are you proposing? Oh, I'll propose. Is there anyone from the public and stuff? Any further board discussion? So we have a motion by Ms. Silver to nominate Mr. Young, Dr. Yamagata, and I will second him. So. Ms. Silver Drew, yes. Mr. Banfield,
Yes.
Mr. Buckman.
I got it for minute composition.
This is something you can explain. So that you have a comment, also that comes in the concept. You need to, policy. That other than the money. Mr. Clausen. Mr. Unger.
Like them both, I don't know Nelson Young, I do know Vicky Martin, and what you saying. Yeah,
So we have. Pardon me? I mean, yes, motion. So we have a, vote of 4 yeses, 1 no, 1 abstention. You thought something about that? Then we have 226, policy.
Yes, thank you. So this is a mandatory revision to board policy 0430, which is comprehensive local plan for special education. Just a couple of changes to it. It specifies the age level of the students that we work with in special education. That's ages 3 to 21. And it talks about special education funding generated through the district and the need to present that to the board annually. So basically transparency in our funding. I recommend that this is my first reading.
Any discussion? Yes, what did you say has changed about age 3 to 21?
It hasn't changed it, it just added it to the wording. We've always had to educate children with disabilities ages 3 to 21. They just put it in this policy for the first time, that type of accessibility.
And they have a cross out part 3 to 21 and then not cross out. So it hasn't been in there before.
Yeah, if it's in red, that means it came from Gannett.
Since the first paragraph.
Yeah, and so I have ages 3 to 21 years to reside within the district. That we can see in there probably.
Yeah.
Very good. So that's the change. And again, it's just clarifying the children who we have been serving, ages 3 to 21.
Any further discussion? Thank you. We'll look forward to have this data on our next one. All right, at this time, we will move on to our consent agenda. Please let me know if there's anything you would like to pull. 11.01, approval of certificated and classified personnel. 11.02, acceptance of donations. 11.03, approval of foreign exchange organization. 11.04, approval of furniture and equipment request. 11.05, approval of minutes, February 7, 2022. 11.06, approval of minutes, February 16, 2023. 11.07, approval of new position, assistant principal of Oklahoma Middle School. 11.08, approval of warrants of bureau. 11.09, proposed revisions to board policy 1313, civility secretary. Could you pull 1104? And I would need a motion, please, for items 11.01 to 11.3 and 11.5 to 11.9.
Approval of items for the 2021 to 11.3 and 11.5 to 11.9.
Seconded. Oh, Mr. Clark. Mr. Unger.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Banfield.
Yes.
Mr. Buckles.
Yeah.
Mr. Overture. Yes. Yes. And 11.04. Mr. Overture. On the bottom items that live where it says desktop workstation, it says HPI. It's Hewlett Packard. Desktop workstations, there was like 60,000 worth. I'm wondering why so many new workstations. There's the whole thing overhaul.
So no, not Aaron's. This was actually with the CP grant to redo the CP digital media lab here at Oregon High School. So that's what those are going to replace the Macs that are now, I think, 7, 8 years old. And it's going to be paid by the CP grant.
Right.
Yeah.
Johnson, since we pulled this, I need to go to the public comment. And Ms. Gilbert, would you like to make a motion to accept item 11.04? Yes, I'll make a motion to accept. Item. I'll second. Ms. Drew? Yes. Mr. Banfield?
Yes.
Mr. Buckman?
Yeah.
Mr. Clausen?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Do we have any request for advance agenda items? Advance agenda. Reports by ordinance. Mr. Bennett.
The other day, we went, Jill and I went to the, Floral High School, went into their theater and, they would get bands and Floral High School. And spring fall concert. Oh, it was really nice. I've got to tell you, they have wired. The program went on a high pitch. I don't know how he did it, but they had all the students seated in the audience, and they were just, very cool emotion. There was no hesitation between groups. Oh, you're gonna blow away. Singing was great. The acoustics of the theater are pretty good too. Really nice.
Anyone else?
I wanted to mention I attended the Slide School Home Opener baseball game and wanted to give a shout out to coaching staff and put a lot of personal work in that field and great experience for me.
No. All right, well, this concludes our, meeting. Stay with us.
Something was a lot of grants.